got to stand in a different place. Maybe I'll stand over here this time. So turn it all the way around. Okay, anybody have any questions from last time, anytime? Okay, I'm going to try an experiment to sort of solicit your participation. You know, I was a student once, and I know it's difficult to raise your hand because you may not feel that the question you ask is going to be a smart question, and you'd be taken the wrong way as not a smart Stanford student. So here's what I'm going to try. Everybody knows that Bart Simpson is not a good student, okay? So I want you to ask a question that Bart Simpson would ask, and it will be attributed to him and not to you. So maybe that's a way to get the load off of asking questions, okay? So if you have a question, you can have Bart Simpson ask it, okay? Does that make any sense? Okay. Bart.
When it comes to meeting with our partner for the project,
Yes.
do you need to be there or?
No. I should say that your projects are going to be self-directed. You're going to have to organize yourself, figure out when you're going to meet, figure out who's going to do what, and everything like that. So it's good for me to know, that you're doing something every week, but don't ask if you have a question about what to do, let me know. But, I expect you to do it on your own, okay? Yes, Bart.
So do you want to be CC'd on all the emails?
No. What I would like you to do is to meet with me, maybe in the beginning, to discuss, what you're doing. And maybe later on you can just send me like a weekly progress report. Because the thing here is, if I don't hear from you, I can only surmise that you didn't do anything on the project that week. And I don't want to feel that way. Okay? All right, thank you. Okay, so we got the same forms. We got the attendance sheet. If you haven't filled it out, do so during the break. There's a handout here. Did everybody get a handout? Okay, that's great. And meet with Dave. So it's like 2 weeks ahead. So I really want to know who you are. So it'd be good if you meet with me so we can discuss things. Okay. So some of the things you should be doing, those who are working on a project that requires fabrication, you want to purchase your shop pass, and also requires a safety session. You want to report your team's progress to me, like I said, and meet with me to discuss it, because I can really help you on your project, okay? I have a perspective which could be useful for you. I can optimize your project and course experience, help you get an optimal grade, whatever that is. And I can help you build a better prototype, okay? I have that knowledge. And if you meet with me, you get a chocolate chip cookie. So some of those things may make sense for you. I really want to see you succeed. There's no adversarial relationship here. It'd be great if everybody, does really good. It just benefits both of us, okay? All the teams are now formed. Here are some that have formed since last week. And remember last class session I had you fill out a form picking discussion topics? Well, here's the result of that. So I'm going to go through these one at a time, maybe top, bottom. So this is lecture topics on demand. Assistive robotics came out up first, so that's what I'm going to talk about real quick. So assistive robots, here's some pictures of them. Big robots, small robots, training robots, feeding robots, all sorts of different kinds of robots. So here's what I'm going to be talking about. All robots in most all forms. This robot is controlled by this woman by just her brain. She's plugged in over here. This robot is a feeding robot. for drinking. This one here is called Pero. It's a robotic pet for older folks, nice and soft and cuddly, and some other ones. But when we think of robots, they're everywhere in our lives. They're, cartoon characters, the Aibo, the Honda robot, the Terminator was a robot, right? Surgical robots, Star Wars robots, a mechanical robot, car robots, telepresence robots. And who can identify this robot here? From Doctor Who, that's your cue.
Dalek.
Dalek, okay. Was the Dalek the actual robot?
Well, there's like an animal inside of it.
Yes, the Dalek is the living thing inside of it, and this case is a robotic exoskeleton for those guys, okay? We have some very realistic-looking robots. The day the Earth stood still, if you ever encounter this robot, here's what you say: Klaktu Barada Nikto. Remember that, okay? Because you never know. So all sorts of robots, industrial robots are used in factories. Medical robots include surgical robots, therapy robots where it actually exercises with you. But we're going to talk about assistive robots, which can be characterized as home servants to help you with activities of daily living. Physical assistance provides walking, which includes prosthetics and exoskeletons, which you're going to hear about a lot next week. Personal mobility robots in cars, wheelchairs, and in transfer devices. So my definition of a robot is a device that can sense, process information, and perform actions. And by adding assistive assistive in front of it, it does so to benefit people with disabilities and older adults. And activities include all these things that you would normally do, every day. Okay? Feeding robots, there's a couple of them. Here's a general purpose robot made by Willow Garage, no longer in business. And this is the telepresence robot that they make called Beam. How many people have been to the Beam store on University? How many salespeople were there? 0. It's a store with no real people in it. Okay. So who would use an assistive robot? Well, there's people with spinal cord injury, cerebral palsy, arthritis, older adults, people with other kinds of disabilities, including stroke, and people who are amputees. So feeding robot, here's I don't know, this robot looks like he's washing this person's face. Here's an assistant robot who's doing something with a spoon. This is an exercise robot, so the idea here is that the robot makes a movement and you're supposed to copy him, the robot. So that's been around for a while. Early robots included this one from Rancho Los Amigos, and this is pretty interesting in that this robot arm is mounted on a wheelchair. So you can only use the robot arm if you're in the wheelchair. So it's not a part of you, it's a part of the wheelchair. There's a desktop robotic workstation. Here's the robot, it can go up and down, slide in and out. A person would be with a disability would be sitting here and using a mouse stick to hit the keys. This is a robot we did at the VA, and if you go into the Gates building, on sort of the side entrance, you'll see another robot there that uses these Omni wheels. This has a robot built in it, a mobile base, and the state-of-the-art Tandy laptop computer. Bumpers on the side, camera up here, so the idea with this robot is that you can control it from a distance and have it pick up things and stuff like that. It took about half an hour to pick up a rose from a vase. So, very slow. Here's another version of that robot. This one is hanging from this shelf over here, so it can reach down to pick up things. And here's the user with a mouth stick operating the computer and the manipulator up here. Who can tell me what these giant CDs were called. Nobody knows. Video discs. Before they were digital, they just put the whole movie on one of these discs. That big. Here's another version of that same robot. Here's an emergency switch to turn it on and off. And later in this project, there was a microwave oven up here. And the robot arm could turn the dial and open the door and put food in there, take it out, and serve a person. So, yeah, that was neat. Here's a student working on a brain-controlled robotic arm. A lot of these pictures are from about 3 years ago, but I wanted to show them. Jibo has been in development for a long time, but I think it's on the market now. It's a stationary robot. It moves its head around and converses with you. Here's a robot at some health fair. It's not really clear to me if it's an exoskeleton, you're sitting in it or what, but I thought I'd show that to you. Here's the Luna robot, again from 3 years ago. Doesn't have much of a carrying capacity, but it can move around your house. Personal, human-sized personal robot. Can keep an eye out for older adults. This is really cool. This is a robot drummer. So it's controlled by his muscles in his arm, and depending on how he flexes or tenses his muscle, it will drum faster or slower. So that enables this musician to be a musician. Here's a bunch of robots for kids. This helps a kid with their diabetes. Here's one that helps kids with autism, a small robot. Here's a more life-size robot supporting children with autism, because children can relate more to a robot than people, so they're taking advantage of that. This is a transformer robot. This wheelchair can level out and make a bed over here, but it can also then become a wheelchair, and this gets by the process of having to lift the person out of bed, transfer them to a wheelchair. So I don't think this is on the market yet, although I've seen it, like about 5 years ago. Pepper robot, laser-guided robot, voice-controlled, and can recognize emotions. Maybe not a robot, but here's a cane that has a camera on it that detects where the obstacles are, and it has a wheel on here which sort of guides you to the free path. Here's a soft robot that's made for washing, because maybe you don't want to be washed, by something that's really strong and solid. So this was made. Here's another feeding robot. And if you're disabled because you only have 2 arms, you can get 2 more arms. Here's the extra pair of robotic arms you've always wanted. Okay? And if you don't like the way they're mounted on the shoulder, you can have them mounted on the waist. Okay? Can you see okay? And if maybe what you need is a couple extra fingers, well, here we are. Supernumerary. That means extra. All these things were done at MIT. Here's a glove that relieves repetitive stress, which is very, very important for workers. Here's a tactile feedback system for gamers. They can actually feel what's going on in the game. And applications include medical rehabilitation. Again, probably not a robot, but a robot made this, a 3D printer made this prosthetic hand for developing countries. And its cost is considerably less, but I don't know how rugged it might be. Exoskeletons. Here's one being developed by NASA. Honda has done a lot of work in this area with walking assist devices that sort of help you walk. or climb stairs. That looks lovely, doesn't it? And this is the Honda U3X. So this is a personal mobility device that has one wheel on the bottom, and you steer it and control it by leaning. And there's a student at Stanford that actually has one of these. How many people have seen it? It looks like he's riding a motorized unicycle. But that's one of these. Okay. Here's apparently a very expensive robot, a home robot that's modular. Here's one that's obviously, made in somebody's garage, or maybe by a student. This one is very clever. So this is a one-wheel balancing robot that can carry your luggage or your shopping. And you've seen people like June, who was here on pitch day. She could probably use one of these things. So basically it follows you, so you don't have to carry all the stuff yourself. Okay? Which may be pretty hard if you're using a walker or in a wheelchair. A companion autonomous robot with a big touchscreen display. Then we get into the realm of telepresence robots, KeithBot, so it allows people to be someplace other than where they are physically. So this would be great if you wanted to go to a conference but don't want to spend the money. So maybe the companies that make these can rent them out so you can have a virtual conference experience without actually being there. Here's an exoskeleton from Exobionics. They'll be here a week from Thursday. So you'll see this in person. They actually had a Paralympic Games for people who use robots as prosthetics or whatever. And it was held about a year and a half ago in Czechoslovakia, I think. And by all accounts, it was really interesting and successful. Here's some new ones I found yesterday and today. A soft robot that helps you grab things. As you saw, a lot of the folks last Thursday didn't have much of a grip. So this might be something that they might provide them a better grip. Here's an exosuit for workers that helps with intensive tasks and reduce injuries. So this is a full body one, and there's some others. So here's a prosthetic finger control. So apparently there's ultrasonic sensors on the fingers which helps him play the piano or hit the keys. Again, for being a musician. Another telepresence robot for family. This is a new exoskeleton vest by Exobionics. All mechanical, has no motors in it. It helps you complete overhead tasks. So if you're a factory worker working on cars above you, something like this can really help you with those tasks. Healthcare assistant for people with dementia. I'm not going to go through these in any detail. And there's this whole slew of robots that are very realistic looking. And so this one, this one is used as a marketing and media robot. So it's advertised that if you bring it to a conference, a lot of people will be attracted to it, and that's the reason for going. So it has no assistive benefit, it's just for advertising. Toddler-sized robot can recognize objects and emotions. Okay, there's a bunch of these on the market. This is a student-built exoskeleton. I think this is University of Michigan. Here's a walking exoskeleton. So the neat thing about this is that you don't have to use anything to help you balance. This will balance all by itself because it's very rugged and it's probably stable in every position. Okay, but it's probably very heavy and very noisy. Okay, these are wheelchairs that have been that an autonomous feature has been added to them. So the idea is there that this will get you around the airport. But if you're a person that uses a wheelchair, how did you get to the airport in the first place? So I'm not sure it's very practical. Powered clothing. So this is a device under design locally, a spin-off of SRI called Seismic. And I'm trying to get them for the Assistive Technology Fair. So the way this works is that there's no metal in it, and basically what this does is it pulls across joints. So it pulls your knee, pulls your hip, and that will provide assistance while walking. Okay? And so, in summary, lots of robots in a lot of different forms, and they can be used in many ways to help people with disabilities and older adults. A lot of research is still ongoing, but most of the ones that I've seen, or I showed you at the beginning there, are one-of-a-kind prototypes. I really haven't seen them make any market penetration. So, and the robots cost a lot of money, right? So those are a barrier to their widespread adoption. I don't think any insurance company would pay for you to get a robot, so that's a barrier. Okay, so that's that. So on Thursday, we're going to be visited by Gary Burke, who's a prosthetist, and he'll be talking about prosthetics, orthotics, and also the design process. So you'll be hearing a lot of stuff about the design process that I talked about, but from a little bit different point of view. So he's great. So today we have students with a disability, and I see Evan up there. I can recognize him from the picture, even though he's in 3D over there and 2D over here. So what we'll do now is take a short break, swap out the slides, and if you haven't picked up a handout or signed the attendance sheet, or you need a cookie, please come down. We'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes. Meet with Dave. Hey, good to...
Hey, thanks for having us.
Oh, thanks for being here. Yeah, so I got your slides and everything, and I have a link to the video at the very end. And just have to come over here. In fact, maybe I'll come over and click that for you.
Oh, okay, awesome. Well, does the picture guy work with the PowerPoint? Because it's a PDF, that's right.
No. So it's in there are slides, so you just go through them the regular way.
Oh, for the video.
But for the video, you have to click on the link, and maybe I'll do that for you. And I think you're up first.
Okay, sweet. That's good. How long have you been teaching this class, by the way?
Half an hour.
No,
today.
like is this the first iteration of the class?
No, 12.
12th iteration.
Yeah,
Okay.
12th
Very
year.
nice.
12th season.
12th season. I like the way you're looking at it. Hey, good to see you.
You too, how are you?
Not too bad. How's your quarter going? Not dead yet. I feel you. That's exactly how I feel about it now. I'm already submitting a late petition for Form I missed, and I'm like, I thought my last year I would finally figure this shit out. I still haven't figured out the deadlines. So funny, it was like, I didn't already study this deadline was Monday. They're like, yes, but you need to do this.
Excellent. Evan, your preference to a clip-on or handheld?
I guess clip-ons.
Okay, let's do that right now.
Jeffy, sorry, I'm Raquel.
Yes.
Nice
Yes.
to meet you.
Thanks so much for coming.
Do you have any Jaffe relatives in the area, by the way? Okay.
There's actually a David M. Jaffe as a student here.
Oh, funny.
Yeah. I'll put it in your pocket.
When I applied to med school, there was another Evan Feinberg at a program I applied to.
Yeah.
And like, not me.
And
I don't want to do this again. No, I went to college with the Jaffe from around here. That's the only reason I'm asking. Yeah.
I found a Rabbi David Jaffe.
Oh, of course, there are going to be multiple. Yeah. There are plenty of Evan Feinberg rabbis too. I guarantee you that. Yeah.
Okay, so this is forward and this is the laser pointer. So.
Sweet.
Oh, that's where the moth was.
Of course.
When it comes to the end, I'll just come up here and look at it.
Okay, great. Oh, this works great.
Comfortable standing or sitting over there?
Sitting is preferable. Is that okay?
Sure.
Thanks. One of the. Hey, good to see you. Is your recorder going?
It's going much better than last quarter.
I like how you said it. Still alive. Still
Well, I
alive.
think
Yeah.
we could have everybody sit in front all at once. But I need to get a couple of chairs.
I don't mind us sitting on the side.
Yeah. But we could.
Yeah, why don't you guys sit over here?
We do that. We could switch off. That works well.
Zena's last, and I forgot, I know Evan's first. There's Bryce, I have a video from Bryce from last year because he has a class at the same time. Okay, so
Sweet.
I'm not sure who's second, but
Cool.
okay. Oh, let me go through this.
Oh, yes, sir.
Right point. No, Dave.
Dave. It was a big adjustment for me moving out here. It was like calling professors by first name basis, which is so not an East Coast thing.
Just call me Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, let's start up. So every year for the last 5 years, I've had this session, bringing some Stanford students, your peers, who happen to have disabilities, just to get their perspective about who they are, a little bit about their disability, a little bit about the assistive technology they use to make them a good Stanford student or a good athlete or whatever, and what their goals are and stuff like that. So we're going to start with Evan.
Everyone, thanks for coming today and for listening. If you have any questions, I'm happy to field them. Do you typically do during or after the talk, sir? Okay, well we can do after, I guess, so we can make sure to get to everyone before the class ends. So just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Evan Feinberg. I'm a fifth-year PhD student in computational biophysics. My advisor is Vijay Pandey, who you might know from the Folding at Home project. And I'm here to tell you about how I got to this point and my experience with physical limitations and how I'm starting to address some of those in my own lab, which is a lot of fun. Let's see. So the title of my talk is going to be pain and prediction, two topics which I've thought a lot about both academically and personally in the past several years. So with the baggage in mind that I'm a biophysicist by training, I like to think about the world in terms of physical models in some way. So as anyone here that studied physics might know, or anyone that studied history in some way, until the 19th century, we had a very classical, let's say, understanding of the world, a very Newtonian, mechanistic understanding. And with the Enlightenment, we thought that using Newton's laws of motion, we could just rationalize the universe, that we can predict everything that will happen. Once we know where every particle is, we'll know where every particle will be in the future. So once we know history, we can predict how countries will operate in the next decades. And that sort of all fell out of the window in the 20th century when Schrödinger and Heisenberg came up with quantum mechanics and showed that the universe and the world around us is inherently stochastic. It's random. It's unpredictable in the most inherent way. And that's not just because we're not smart enough, but just because we physically can't predict how the future will happen. And one of my favorite quotes is from Niels Bohr, or for those of you that are athletes in the room, you might think Yogi Berra said this, but it's misattributed to him. It's really Niels Bohr. Said that it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. One of, if not my favorite quotes. So how does this apply to me? I'm going to really date myself here, but when I started college in 2009, I had a very linear Newtonian Enlightenment style way of thinking about how my life would go. I wanted to do an MD, PhD program. I wanted to become a physician scientist, start a lab, treat patients. Even though I had no medical conditions of my own at that point, I was very healthy, happy, young camper in college. I always really cared about helping others, and that was what I wanted to do. But when you want to do an MD, PhD, you have to predict far in advance, lest you collect Social Security by the time you finish school. The plan was very straightforward. I'd graduate in 2013. I'd apply to MD, PhD programs right before. I'd finish my degree in 2021 and start my actual career in 2025, which is still in the future. But as I should have learned from Niels Bohr in physics class, not everything always goes to plan. It's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. So in college, I was diagnosed with a condition called compartment syndrome, which is a chronic leg condition in which the intracompartmental pressure that arises in your leg compartments, the muscle and fascia in your different muscle groups, the pressure gets too high. And as a result, your arteries get compressed, your nerves get compressed, and as a result, you feel pain. And I started running because I was stressed from my med school applications, and that was my way of dealing with it. I was kind of a dork. I didn't really party and stuff. I just went running a lot. It got to a point where even walking to class was really painful. And I told my parents, I'm like, I didn't want to go to class today. It kind of hurts to walk to class. They're like, that's not normal. You should get that checked out. They were right. Sure enough, I had compartment syndrome. So the summer that I was supposed to take the MCAT, I had surgery on both my lower legs to release my compartments. I thought, okay, great. My plan was a little bit derailed, but it's okay. My compartments are released. I can go to grad school, which is how I got to here. And in my first year of grad school, I thought I'd apply to med school. Everything would be hunky-dory. Unfortunately, in my first year of grad school, when I was trying really hard to learn some crazy linear algebra classes and whatever, I was just struggling to think because I was in so much pain. I would sit at my desk and try to solve equations, and it's like how, for those of you that are athletes, Russell Wilson learned football while doing math problems in his head. His dad would make him solve math problems in his head while throwing footballs. There's a way to do both. That's what it felt like for me. Like solving math problems while also having to do something else at the same time. It was tough. So I had surgery again here at Stanford twice. That obviously changed my career plans. Because I ended up tearing a tendon in recovery, and pain never really went away. So I had to change course. I had to adapt. Still doing physical therapy now. If you ever go debating, you might see me there twice a week. As a physicist, I really want to know why. I'm obsessed with why. If you ever study physics or math, it's all about derivation, starting with axioms and figuring out the reason. So another thing that we couldn't predict was that the price of sequencing a genome would drop precipitously. If I had gotten this condition several years ago, I probably would never have been sequenced. Insurance doesn't cover it, and $10,000 is like 25% of grad student salary. So I got my whole exome sequenced and found out the reason why I was getting compartment syndrome was almost certainly because of a mutation in RYR1, which is a calcium channel that both you and I had never heard of before recently. And the reason that we can visualize this, which is the calcium channel, calcium goes through here into the cell. I have a mutation in these glutamate residues here. I made these slides myself because I'm a computational biophysicist, so I can just download the structure of RYR1 and make the slide. And the reason I can do that is because Joachim Frank, a Columbia professor, won the 2017 Nobel Prize for doing cryo-electron microscopy, which is how they solved this structure just last year. So zooming out from the nanometer scale of how I got here, this is a class in assistive technology. So I should mention that the way that I function is partially due to the guy that you're going to get a lecture from next, Gary Burke, who's a wonderful, wonderful clinician who I've seen many times. He's made me several orthoses, a wonderful drug called Celebrex, which has been a lifesaver, and foam rolling, physical therapy, and some crazy ergonomic devices. And that's how we got here today. So this is just a little video of the mu opioid receptor, which is the way Vicodin, morphine, all other opioids function. A big part of the focus of my PhD research is to try to find opioids that are not addicting. And this is an atomic level portrait, some might say, like the paintings I showed in the beginning, of how a very strong opioid interacts at the atom by atom level with the opioid receptors in your brain. And we're hoping with our lab's research to rationally discover new opioids. And if that interests you and you do some computer science or interested in getting involved with that, let me know. You know, we're in a position or something for doing that. Anyway, thank you for listening, and you're going to hear some awesome talks over here by these guys. But afterward, if you're interested in anything I said, come talk. Great, thanks. Thank you. Oh yeah, I think I got 2 things here.
Okay. Thanks so much. Our next speaker isn't here. He has a class at the same time. So I asked him if I can just play his video from last year. So that's what I'm going to do next. Bryce.
I'm a freshman planning to study political science, and I have dyslexia. And if you don't really know what that is, it's pretty much a learning disability based on has to do with phonological processing and impairment in reading and writing ability, generally speed, and spelling often. And pretty much the learning disabilities, they're generally talked about, in schools, because it pretty much, if you think about how much reading and writing you do, that's pretty much all you do in school. So I'll just sort of start by going back and talking about how I sort of discovered I was dyslexic and things like that. So in 3rd grade, I still wasn't really reading like the other kids. My sister had also been slow to learn how to read, and now she reads like faster than anyone else and reads the Odyssey. So my parents weren't that worried. But by 3rd grade, it was pretty clear that my reading speed was not anywhere near the other students. But luckily, I was in a family where they knew about dyslexia. Both my uncles were dyslexic and were actually some of the first people to be studied and tested for dyslexia. And so they got me tested. I went to an exam. You'll hear about the same sort of thing from people with ADHD. It's sort of the same psychological tests. And they showed that I had dyslexia. And kind of from that point on, I pretty much had to deal with sort of accommodations and things like that. And how I went to public school at the time, it was one of the best public schools in the country, but how pretty much all public schools deal with accommodations is they decide that you're like all the other kids with similar accommodations, like ADHD, we only had pretty much kids with ADHD and dyslexia at my school. And they put you in a room, take you out of one of the classes, and put you in a room for like an hour, and have you do various either exercises or work on your work or get assistance from their disability coordinator. And I didn't need that at all. I was doing great in school besides spelling tests, which I failed pretty much every single time. The one thing that dyslexia teaches you is how to not be worried about getting a bad grade on a test. Which is something I'm finding very valuable now. Not so things are going okay, but still, it's I'm glad I had that experience. And so in elementary school, it was just sort of me because it's a school for kids, but no one else had any disabilities, so I was just sort of taken out and dealt with this disability coordinator person who kind of coached me on writing and things like that. But when I went to middle school, they really did just pull me out of a class. And what they pulled me out of was the art class. They pulled me out of the fun one. And they pulled me out of language, because it was during the same block. And that turned out to be a really big problem, because eventually I moved to the city, and I went to a private school where they knew how to deal with disabilities. It wasn't a school for students with disabilities, but it was a school where they sort of understood. And I immediately started foreign language, and the one that they started that hadn't been started earlier was Latin, so I started Latin, which was a mistake. And what I found out is not only was Latin incredibly difficult for me, it was almost impossible, and almost any foreign language was, which is another big part of dyslexia for a lot of people. I really want to make very clear that dyslexia is so different for everyone, and it's really complicated. If you ever want to have a weirdly long conversation about the DSM-5, I can do that. And so I found out that I pretty much couldn't learn languages, and I got an exemption. But sort of trying to bring this all back to the topic of this, which is assistive technology. I definitely would not be where I am right now without all the assistive technologies I've used, and the ones I've used have changed a lot. But the biggest things I use are, for a really long time, I used dictation software, which I don't use anymore. But above all of that is anything that converts things into audio. So when my parents realized that I couldn't really read like the other students, and reading was very important to my sister, they sort of immediately realized that books are such an important part of life and of learning. And that there sort of had to be a way for me to be able to interact with those. So, early on, my mom would read aloud to me. But then, of course, what I found was audiobooks. So probably my most beloved possession as a kid was this little Discman thing. Still have it in my room somewhere, but I just avid listener of audiobooks. And that part, while the dictation software sort of dissipated as I slowly compensated and learned how to type faster and things like that. That audio element has been incredibly important to me, kind of throughout being able to cope with school and just for enjoyment. Because I read so much slower, audio is crucial to being able to accomplish all the readings. Without the audio, last quarter I was able to read a book a week, which would have been unimaginable without my audio aids. And I know probably a lot of you heard the screen reader technology just earlier using the phone, and it might sound a little fast to you. But something I realized is, to me, that sounded pretty normal, because that's the speed at which I read pretty much all my books. Because in order to actually get everything done, you need to read it incredibly quickly. You may not really notice this, but speech is obviously a lot slower than reading in your head. And so just kind of all the more technical aspects. I work through the OAB. That's another problem, acronyms, switching around letters. Makes it difficult when I can't spell correctly the office that I need to work through. Pretty much what I do is one of the reasons why I actually chose Stanford was because of the OAB. Because they have technology there that pretty much what they'll do is they'll digitize all of my textbooks. I send them a receipt, show I actually did buy the book, and they'll buy a second copy, cut it up, and send it through a high-speed scanner. And the important part of that for me is it converts it into a text, editable PDF. And then from there, I use Apple's built-in text-to-speech software to convert that into audio. And what I've now found out, which is even better, but sometimes has a lot of problematic elements, is also converted to MP3 for me. Sometimes I use that. But the biggest problems I found with audio, especially when you're reading, as a political science major, a lot of things are sort of journal articles, things like that. When you're reading things like that, there are a lot of footnotes, and you don't always necessarily want to read the footnotes. And often the footnotes are citations, and they're in kind of weird form. And of course, the text-to-speech software picks up that too. And so it makes it kind of difficult. I have to kind of jump between forms for different methods. Well, the MP3 is sort of more convenient. Usually I have to use the PDF because I'll be able to highlight a bit of text. And so generally, like audio has just, and technology in general has just been so transformative in my ability to actually be able to function in school. But obviously, especially for something like dyslexia and other sort of invisible disabilities, it's always, the social interaction part is also really difficult. Like, is often really difficult. Less now, because I find it so important to sort of advocate for myself, and I've definitely gotten more confident in it. But like being the only one using a computer in class, for instance, because I need to take notes by typing because my handwriting is horrible and slow, and that's sort of another part of my dyslexia and dysgraphia, which is another thing I have. But sort of overall, the biggest thing I think my dyslexia has helped me with is oral communication. Because writing was so sort of slow and difficult for me, being able to convey myself and sort of think on my feet, and convey my thoughts orally became really, really kind of easier for me. And in general, I really do see my dyslexia sort of as a blessing. And kind of, I just like to open up questions.
Thank you, Bryce. Our next panel member is Raquel. Well, this is for the camera.
Gotcha. Got it. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Hi guys, I'm Raquel Bro. That's me. I do not really use robotic devices like we saw a ton of earlier, but I have been called a robot. Does that count? So a brief intro to me. I was born without both of my legs below the knee. I don't know, it's never really been a problem for me. I'm very blessed to have a family and to have grown up in an area surrounded by people that are very supportive of me and who always encouraged me to do whatever I wanted and pushed me to realize that I'm not limited by anything. So it's a little bit interesting. Most of my life revolves around activities that I do with no assistive devices whatsoever. I am actually a two-time Paralympic swimmer, and so in the Paralympics, you're not allowed to have any assistive devices or technology or anything whatsoever that might give you an advantage over the other people. So I just kind of jump in the pool without any legs on, and I just go. And similarly, the assistive devices that I do use don't, I think, necessarily have a direct impact on my success or failures as a student at Stanford. But let me just kind of give a brief overview of what devices I do use. So as I said, I'm a double amputee, missing both of my feet, so I use prosthetic devices. And actually, Gary Burke he's so wonderful. Whenever I have an emergency involving my prosthetic legs, I go to Gary Burke. So he'll be great for you guys on Thursday. I would have worn shorts, but it's really cold outside. So I can, here's one prosthetic leg, guys. I used to get super crazy patterns because I was young and loved zebra, so I used to have zebra patterned legs. But then I was about to go to college and I was like, I have to look like an adult, even if I'm not one on the inside. So I just got carbon fiber. So since I have both of my knees, I don't really use any super advanced robotic devices in my prosthetics. But people that are missing their legs, they have these really cool things called C-legs, missing their knees, they have really cool things called C-legs that act as a knee. So, when you're walking, how you swing your knee forward, if you don't have any knees, it doesn't happen. So there's a robotic device that it measures your walking gait and the speed and the tilt of the ground, and it's really cool. Don't use that though. Sorry guys, I'm not that cool. And something that my prosthetist, the person who makes my legs is the prosthetist, something that he has noticed also is that his patients who are congenital amputees or who are missing their legs or their arms or their limbs from birth prefer to have very minimal technology, whereas people who had it amputated later on in life prefer the more advanced technology because it probably feels more like a limb that they have been used to. So again, since I've been missing them since birth, I kind of just use the basics, the bare necessities. It's literally a carbon fiber socket with a titanium rod and then a carbon fiber and plastic foot. And that's the extent of it. And so, sorry, I took notes on my other robotic device, so you're going to have to excuse me for a minute while I make sure that I know what I'm talking about. So, just another side note about me real quick. Like Bryce, I'm majoring in political science with a focus in international relations, and I'm minoring in human rights. And in my future career goals, I really want to do international disability rights, specifically because the US is such a leader with the ADA and all the things that we have enacted to support and protect our disabled people. But there are so many other places in the world that have nothing. Then there's disabled people in a lot of third world countries that don't even have the right to life or the right to full citizenship, let alone the right to go to Stanford and get in the pool and start swimming and do whatever they want. They just don't have the basic protections that I have. So I was racking my brain trying to come up with other cool assistive devices that I use, and something that maybe a lot of people wouldn't think about is my bike. And I know that probably lots of people here also use bikes or skateboards or scooters or rollerblades or a unicycle. But for me, walking long distances is really hard on my limbs because they're just sitting in this carbon fiber socket, and so they get sores or blisters, or in summertime they get really sweaty because it's really hot in the sockets and there's nowhere for the sweat to go, which is kind of gross. So they just kind of slide off. But so my bike is really important to me because it allows me to get from one side of campus to the other without putting too much stress on my legs. But also on that note, traditional bikes with you know how like the pedals are like directly under the seat post and like it's an awkward little angle. Maybe it's just awkward for me, but that makes my knees hurt because my patellas are really abnormally small and I don't have all the bones, and so the tendons are connecting weirdly. So that kind of bike is not good for me. So I have do any of you guys have a Townie bike that has the pedal slightly offset, so it's like just in front of the seat post? Yeah, those are really great. My knees don't hurt when I bike all the way across campus. So that's another assistive device that I use. And I think, like Bryce was saying, that I don't know, the disability really gives you a different perspective on life because there are so many things that you have to learn how to do differently, or in the first place, how I had to learn in the first place, a completely different way of walking. But I liked what Bryce had in his short description of himself, that, and I feel like it applies to me too, but that having a disability, sometimes you have to get creative about how you're going to do certain things. So, like when I get in the shower and I sit on the shower chair, I got to make sure that I put my legs within arm's reach in in my bucket so that they stay dry and all these things. Yeah, and
Can you talk about your foundation?
yes, I would love to. So when I was a little bit younger, my mom and I were talking, and we were both really frustrated about how few resources there are for other young girls who are disabled. Because when I was born, my parents were told, she's never going to walk, she's probably not going to do great in school just because socializing is hard when you're disabled. And all these like really disappointing things the doctors told us, and it was really hard to hear from my parents. And I'm really grateful that they didn't believe any of those and said, no, Raquel, you're going to be fine. But on that, it's kind of sad how the world, I don't know how to say this, but like doesn't expect much of disabled people, if that makes sense. And so I started this foundation called My Feet Don't Stink, because my feet don't. And it's to encourage, empower, and educate other young girls with disabilities and their parents, and give them resources so that they can learn that they're completely capable of living a completely ordinary life. A disability isn't the end. Yeah. Anything else?
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Have Zena give her presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions. And that'll give us maximum time for your talk. Our next and last presenter is Zena, who's been at this every year. So she's no longer a rookie, she's a veteran in doing this.
Can I use the clicker for the
Yeah.
PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. This is the button.
Yeah.
Just checking. That work? No? Okay. Testing. Can everyone hear me? Is this a good spot for? Is the PowerPoint on this already?
Yeah, just click.
Oh, okay. Great. كنت قرقوت آخر مرة شفتك من زمان. One of my Iraqi aunts, whom I had not met before, said this to me when I was 7 years old. I responded, "Sorry, can you speak English? I do not understand Arabic well." She nosily asked, "Why don't you speak Arabic?" My mother jumped in and explained that I had serious hearing loss and that it took me years of intensive speech therapy just to learn English. My aunt gasped and said, "Khataya." "Thank you," I said, assuming Khataya was some sort of Arabic mazel tov, or good thing. From that moment on, I was delighted when my family and friends praised me with Khataya, which they did often. In fact, I was delighted when my family and friends praised me with Khataya. And over the years, this Khataya has become my source of motivation to overcome obstacles. My name is Zena Jawadi, and I am currently a senior at Stanford majoring in biology. Although I am hearing impaired, I have been mainstreamed my entire life, which means that I attended school with hearing students. In fact, for the majority of my life, I was the only hearing impaired student in my entire school. There were several technologies that have contributed to my success. Here are the topics we will discuss today. First, I will provide a background about myself. I was diagnosed with hearing loss when I was 3.5 years old. For the next 8 years, everyone else my age was riding merry-go-rounds. Meanwhile, my childhood years were expended riding a cycle of speech therapy, yes, that is my speech therapist, more than 10 hours a week, learning to pronounce one letter at a time. When I started speech therapy, I quickly learned that each speech therapist had an agenda. For example, Sarah's was to differentiate ga from da, Vicky was to listen rather than to speech read, and Sarah's was to enunciate the letter R, often saying, "It is not R, it is R. Curl your tongue." Due to my lingering speech impediment, I'm still frequently asked where I am from, despite being born and raised here in Silicon Valley. I attended the Harker School in San Jose from kindergarten to 12th grade. While at Harker, I participated in various extracurricular activities, many of which would be considered counterintuitive for someone who cannot hear. For instance, I started playing classical piano when I was in kindergarten and would take annual classical music theory tests. In sophomore year in high school, I completed the 10th and highest level of the Certificate of Music Theory with the highest marks and was even invited to play in an honorary recital. Additionally, I started competing in public speaking tournaments in 6th grade and competed in varsity level tournaments. My junior year, I became a national public speaking finalist, receiving 4th place out of hundreds of original oratory contestants. This achievement was humbling for me because ear specialists predicted that I may never speak English normally ever. Lastly, since 8th grade, my life goal has been to change the world of hearing scientifically and socially. I'm incredibly fortunate to have precociously started my career since then. For example, a few years ago, I discovered the Hearing Loss Association of America, or HLAA. HLAA is the largest national nonprofit organization for people with hearing loss. As president and board member of the Hearing Loss California State Association, I have been blessed with many opportunities to provide support and advocacy for people with hearing loss. There are various technologies that have contributed to my success. Let's begin with the FM system. The FM system is a device typically worn by teachers in the classroom and is used in conjunction with hearing aids. The device picks up the teacher's voice and transmits it directly to the hearing aids through pegs that attach to the hearing aids. To my ears, the FM system sounds like a microphone. While I don't use an FM system anymore, for many years my FM system was beneficial and even amusing at times. Once in 1st grade, I walked to the restroom almost 50 feet away from the classroom and suddenly heard my teacher having a private conversation with another student. Needless to say, I quickly turned off the FM system. Stanford's Office of Accessible Education, or OAE, provides me captioning in all classes and events. In virtual captioning, the professor puts on a Bluetooth, which transmits the professor's voice for a captioner, as shown right here. The captioner then transcribes what is being said. As the captioner types, I see the captions through an app on my iPad. Unfortunately, because virtual captioning often has technical issues, such as the internet being cut off, I feel that in-person captioning, called CART, is more effective. In-CART, that's my captioner right there, sits through all my classes and transcribes what is being said. I find this captioning better because there are fewer technical issues that I personally have to deal with right before class. My captioner, Audrey here, is really fantastic, and she's honestly been a tremendous positive experience here at Stanford for me. There are many startups working on improving captioning. For example, there's a startup called Ava, which has developed a real-time captioning app that uses speech recognition to identify who is speaking and what they are saying. I think speech recognition technology is transforming this field. For instance, during board meetings, instead of using a captioner, we can use a product like Ava's. Especially for long board meetings that are recurrent, this technology may be cheaper than captioning. Next, let's discuss hearing aids. A hearing aid consists of a tiny microphone, amplifier, processor, and battery. This is the mold, this is the wire, the battery goes over here, and this is the main body of the hearing aid. The microphone receives sounds and converts them into electrical pulses. The processor decides what sounds should be magnified and by how much. The amplifier then magnifies these pulses, and the battery is the power source. Most people think that hearing aids correct hearing loss like eyeglasses do for eyes. Sadly, this is not the case at all. A normal ear selects meaningful sounds and filters out uninteresting ones. This is done automatically under the brain's control. Hearing aids, on the other hand, amplify all sounds and voices indiscriminately. With hearing aids, noise often becomes louder than the conversation. In addition, a hearing aid can cost thousands of dollars, excluding batteries and repairs. According to the CDC, the lifetime cost per person with severe to profound hearing loss exceeds $1 million. I see the future of hearing technology reducing the cost of hearing aids and background noise. Additionally, hearing aids are uncomfortable and unstylish. So what child wants to wear these things? Perhaps Perhaps it was my frustration with hearing aids that I accidentally dropped my hearing aids near the gate at my house. That resulted in a state of frenzy, but the real climax was in second grade when the hearing aids truly unintentionally fell on the floor of the garage and were driven over by my mother. My father gave me the look of someone who just lost thousands of dollars. So we have just discussed assistive technologies that enhance communication and improve listening quality. However, people with hearing loss often have safety concerns, such as hearing fire alarms. Stanford's Office of Accessible Education has installed a fire alarm in my dorm that flashes light just in case I cannot hear the sound of the fire alarm, which, by the way, is piercingly loud. Today, we discussed assistive technology for people with hearing loss. When I started, I mentioned all the khatiyas that everyone showered me with when I was a child. And I always assumed that it meant you were doing great despite the odds. One day, my family and I were in a wedding, and I enthusiastically shouted khatiya to the bride and groom. My mother immediately pulled me aside and said, Zina, you realize khatiya means poor thing, right? Poor thing? Unfortunately, as I discovered over the years, khatiya, or pity for people with disabilities, is an international phenomenon. Yet I believe my life represents what I previously thought khatiya meant, an Arabic version of mazel tov. Ear experts would not have expected me to be where I am today. And so I am proud to still embrace my childhood's perception of khatiya. Mazel tov. Thank you. Sure. Maybe I should leave it up to discussion and then answer questions from there. Yeah.
Well, no, this session really has a lot of meaning for me and the students, and I really applaud them for being so open, with themselves and their disability, and for your benefit. I want to personally thank everybody for participating. Thank you so much. I also want to thank the sign language interpreters and for everybody who's... So we have a little bit more time. If anybody has a question for one of our panelists, now would be the time to ask that question or come up and talk to them personally. As far as your evaluation sheets, just leave them on the desk. And I'll see you on Thursday if there's no questions. Thanks again.
So funny.
Okay. Okay. Let's turn off.